Spokane Valley could become a sanctuary city of a different
Councilman
kind.
Caleb Collier says that this
I'm proposing that the city of Spokane Valley issue a proclamation stating that our city is a Second Amendment sanctuary city.
Welcome to the fire.
Today on Church and State, The Great Pretense with Bill Conroy. Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we drive morality and religion over tolerance and apathy. And I'm your host, Caleb Collier, once again, your favorite far-right shock jock, and the show that talks about politics and religion. Jesus Christ is our referee, so it's always nice and clean. Real quick, let's point you to the website, churchandstate.media. Fill out our form, get our newsletter, bypass a lot of the censorship, and of course, I personally call every single one of you who fills this out, so please do so if you want to talk with me. Also, check out our most recent episodes. We continue to bring incredible guests, just fun shows, oftentimes topics that you're not finding anywhere else, so please share them with friends, family, and neighbors. Also, check out our featured guest page. Had some incredible people over the years that have joined us. We are updating that because we've had a lot of new guests that have appeared, and so look for those. But click on the name. It'll take you right to the episodes. Also, do a little bit of shopping with our great affiliate program. These are companies that I personally use, that I trust, and a lot of them are just great stuff, and I'll be covering one of those after the hard break. But all of them, use the promo code Church and State. Many of those, you'll get a discount. All of them, you'll be helping to support us. And speaking of support, you got to hit the donate button for us, ladies and gentlemen. I actually just looked. There were only about 390 to 400,000 active podcasters in America today. That's actually not a lot. And you found us. You seem to like us. So keep us alive on great programs like NRBTV, Prepper Broadcasting Network, Your News, Faith and Freedom Television, and now literally starting this week, Chris, we have national syndication on AM/FM radio, so please hit the donate button for us. And lastly, if you want to get a hold of us, Church and State 1776 at proton.me. With that, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Now, I'm absolutely thrilled to bring Bill Conroy. He's a veteran investigative journalist covering national security, the war on drugs, and intelligence agencies since 1988 in the United States and Latin America. Holds a master's degree in mass communication journalism from Marquette University, and has worked as a staff reporter for a number of great news organizations, specifically a great correspondent for Narco News. Bill, it is a pleasure to have you on Church and State.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Now, that's quite a lot that you've done in your lifetime, and I want to focus right now on your latest book, The Great Pretense, a tour through the boneyard of the CIA's war for drugs. Americans tend to have a little bit of short-term memory loss. And you bring up something like the Iran-Contra scandal. And even within the conservatives, you went from this scandal to all of a sudden Ollie North was this big celebrated guy. He had his own show and everything. But there was a lot of funny business going on with the CIA during the 80s, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, I think it continues. The power dynamic with the CIA is they kind of have to change clothes every time there's a new administration, because the White House sets the policy and then the CIA executes. And so, back in the 1980s, it was, purging Latin America of communists. I guess it was communists, like in Iran-Contra, in the crack cocaine scandal that resulted from that, with Ollie North running the operation, among others, was, a way to get around Congress, because Congress had banned funding for the Contra insurgency in Nicaragua, which was trying to overthrow the Sandinistas, which were, communists in outlook and in alliances, I guess. And so that's the history of Latin America, has been us going down there and shooting people when we don't like them. And
Well, and beyond
trying to
that, Bill,
mold, yeah,
like also not just shooting, these individuals, and I'm going to get into, current things with Venezuela and things, but, also bringing in drugs into LA specifically and selling those drugs and getting, a whole bunch of the black community addicted to this. It was absolutely horrifying that our government had a part in this.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the operation. The operation was they used assets, which aren't CIA assets are basically like FBI informants. They're on the payroll. They get paid by the job normally, and they get called up, and in this case the assets were the Contras. They were working with the Contras, and the Contras needed money to buy guns, and so the CIA facilitated the transportation of cocaine into the country, which at the time that was the beginning of the crack epidemic, right? They had learned how to take cocaine and make crack out of it, and it was like it was very addictive. I mean, it just spread like wildfire across the country, if people remember that era. And yeah, the CIA enabled the trafficking of cocaine, and it isn't the first time. The book discusses a number of cases where drugs are not the CIA's priority. It's carrying out the White House objectives, and it's gathering intelligence, but they're not interested in busting drugs. They never have been. In fact, they'll use the drug trade to facilitate intelligence gathering or covert actions targeting, the White House's objectives. And that's in Latin America, as I said, that's often been this ongoing back and forth between the left and right, because the governments there they're democracies, but there's also a lot of corruption. It just, I guess, like here now, it always has been. So and that means the drug trade is interwoven into, Latin America, because there's so much demand for the product up here. It's like making, it rains money, and it corrupts everything. And it corrupts stuff on this side of the border. People think it doesn't, or don't tend to think it's only a Latin American problem. It's not. It's a money problem, and it's a lot of money, and a lot of misery.
Let me ask you this on this drug issue, because this is something that I've kind of rolled through my brain a number of times. Government obviously hates competition. Now we have the pharmaceutical companies with the legal drugs. I'm not going to get started on all the different side effects that I don't know why anybody would take those. I'll just put it that way. But do you believe that the CIA is specifically using these illegal drugs to fund, all of their clandestine activities throughout the world?
Well, I think it's one stream of revenue, and because I don't know that anyone does, because these operations are highly classified, compartmentalized, and only a few people know the full, the picture of that particular operation, but they may not know how it relates to another side operation that has been launched. And sometimes those operations compete with each other. That's when people die, when informants get whacked, information gets leaked. And we have, I think, a case of that going on in Mexico right now with the CIA targeting assassinations. The CIA and the U.S. Military, basically most of the time contractors, but they're like former special ops guys, have worked closely with Mexican Marines, vetted Mexican Marines, in assisting targeting narco-trafficking organizations. Now, the level of involvement in a particular operation targeting, like when El Mencho was a cartel leader, probably the most powerful cartel in Mexico right now, was killed. I mean, the CIA was, at least publicly, they admit, was involved in providing intelligence, right, to help target him. But the level of involvement, kinetic involvement, as they call it, on the ground, I mean, it varies. I mean, if you're on the scene, you're involved. And if you're getting shot at, you can shoot back. So you can't, it's like Vietnam. We sent in advisors first, and then, they were had a certain level of involvement, and then later the troops came in. And so CI is like the tip of the spear. It's covert action is the one step short of starting a war. But that's why you don't want to get caught or have a covert activity exposed, because the stakes are high for the
Sure,
people.
And then they can blame it. It's a perfect boogeyman, right? Anytime they're going into really any country in Latin America and they're doing an assassination or whatnot, they can just blame another cartel. All right, they can go in there, shoot up the place, and say, "Well, cartel violence," and the CIA's hands are clean.
The way they work, though, not that I like it, but it is. If you think about it, it's a bit brilliant. They don't, it's not like a CIA employee goes out and does the hit. They have, access to all kinds of contractors. And also they can play one cartel against the other, because some of these guys hate each other. So you leak information to a cartel about the location and of a rival that they can take out. That's as much as putting a hit on them. And then your hands are kind of clean, because you didn't have any direct involvement. You just provided the intel that allowed this other cartel to carry out the act. So there's all kinds of games like that in that world. But in Mexico, you have this, we have since, going back to 2010 and 11, I was writing about, because we had leaks coming out of there about cooperation. And then it finally makes the New York Times and it becomes the known factor. That where it's over, where we're working, cooperating, it's not unilateral. In other words, we are working with the Mexican government, with their vetted units to target this problem. But then we launched, apparently, a covert, unilateral, without Mexican government knowledge, CIA operation. And that means you've got an overt operation and a covert operation that's out whacking people. Or whatever their charge is. In this case, it supposedly was an assassination team. Now, whether, like I said, it might have been through a contractor or leaking intelligence, but Francesco Beltran was assassinated outside Mexico City. And look at this timeline. El Mencho was killed in February. That was an overt cooperation, with overt cooperation with our government, I guess, with the CIA. Then Francesco Beltran is assassinated in March. That was a covert operation that the Mexican government claims they knew nothing about. It was carried out unilaterally by our government, and it was running alongside the overt operation. Then in April, 2 CIA agents die in a mysterious car accident in the mountains of Chihuahua while traveling with state police who are known to be aligned with a rival cartel to the Sinaloa cartel, the Juarez cartel, which is now La Línea, which is essentially police and cops. And it always has been. So we're embedded with one cartel and our guys get whacked. We don't know. At least I had a source telling me that it was a car bomb. It wasn't an accident, right? And whether they were targeting their rivals, because these state police, were they high-level members of the Juarez cartel, La Línea, and that was their target, or did they know that CIA was there? But regardless, we have this trail here. The timeline shows that it is very possible that because the cartels were trained by us. People forget that. We were training thousands of special ops guys during the Meredith initiative, thousands. And they go back and many of them, leave the military and get hired by the cartels because they have this expertise. So we're dealing with a very sophisticated, the cartels are very sophisticated, both in their, logistics and their intelligence gathering. And if you go down, like when I was in Juarez, they call them hawks on every street corner. They got someone a lot of times they're little kids, 10, 9, 12, 13-year-olds, watching for anything unusual, and they report right back to the leader in that sector. So they're always aware of who's there. So that's why we can't win a drug war by just killing kingpins, because they're as replaceable as heroin addicts in many ways. And I hate to put it that way, but there's always someone under the guy in charge who wants to be in charge, and you just open the door to them. But you also fracture the cartel cohesiveness, and you get a lot of mini cartels that are extremely violent and are fighting for drug route turf. That's what a lot of the murders are, is controlling the plazas, which are the border cities like Nuevo Laredo, Juarez, Tijuana, and then the drug routes up, which come from, if it's cocaine, come through Colombia, the Central America, and Mexico. And Mexico, that's how the cartels in Mexico grew to power. They ended up really controlling that trade versus the Colombians. And early on it was the Colombians and Pablo Escobar, and later it was El Chapo and El Mayo in Mexico. So that's kind of the dynamics. It's a business. It's a huge business, and the guy we just pardoned, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was the former president of Honduras, was convicted of trafficking up to 400 tons of cocaine, or allowing it, getting paid off to allow it to flow through Honduras along the drug routes uninhibited. And he's pardoned, and he's trying to get back into office. So what's going to happen, and what I think is happening, as we do the Shield of America, which is this coalition of Latin American countries, now with I don't care if it's left wing or right wing. The principle I'm trying to get across here, all with this case, right wing governments, because we're comfortable working with right wing, the frankly fascist governments, more so than socialist or communist governments. Right? That's just always been the mindset, which I think is insane. But that's the geopolitical map. So we have 19 countries in the Shield of America in which we're already tied up in Iran, but we're going to provide troops at their request to go out and target narcos and drones or whatever. We just gave $1 billion to Colombia, no strings attached. And the guy that just got elected president of Colombia was worked as an attorney defending paramilitary narcos. That was where he made his money. He made his money off the drugs, and now he's president. The other guy I talked about, Hernandez, who is angling to get back into power in Honduras, is a drug trafficker. So we're like exchanging one set of drug traffickers for another. They happen to be more aligned with.
Let me piece this together for the audience, Bill, because I mean, we gave Colombia $1 billion, right?
Right.
Nobody, no banker, no private individual is going to loan somebody any amount of money without a return, right? The ROI. And so we know that the United States, that there are strings attached here. And
right.
When I'm looking at it, all these different foreign wars. I mean, we've been in foreign wars since at least 2001.
It's Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean Vietnam too.
Never
Yes,
stopped.
You're absolutely right. And so obviously we're looking to fund this. We already have been talking about this drug trade. We can fund a lot of our operations and our operators through these drugs, and the CIA. I mean, their hands are all over this. Let me throw this at you as well, because I have a lot of conservatives that watch this show. Even though I'm an outspoken libertarian, they tend to like a lot of what I say. To that audience who would say, well, we have to be doing this, right? We have to go over there. We got to go into, all these Latin American countries or Iran or whatnot because we want to keep America safe. And I don't necessarily care that the CIA is out there assassinating, foreign individuals because it's keeping Americans safe. Mm-hmm. What would you say to these people?
Well, if it was true, if it was provable that, doing that made drugs less prevalent, harder to get, helped reduce the flow, helped reduce the harm to the U.S. society from, narcotics. It'd be hard to not defend what they're doing. But the problem is, we did this already. People, like you say, have short memories. Plan Colombia, which actually was initiated under Clinton, but then run all the way up till 2015, when, and there's reasons it ended then. It had nothing to do with politics or with whether it was a Republican or a Democrat in office, but it ran that long, spent $10 billion. A lot of people died, including some of our own contractors, right, that were down there, running missions. And, the results were what, it didn't change anything. It didn't change. So we spent a lot of treasure and some of our blood, and we're in a worse position in many ways now than we were when we started that. And we did the same thing with Plan Mexico. And we poured all this money in, trained all these these military operatives in these foreign countries. And, corruption doesn't exist there. So, yeah, what's going to happen after they leave the military? Or maybe they weren't really military to begin with, because the cartels, buy off people all over, including generals. And so there you have it. The problem isn't, you can't shoot your way out of this. You have to figure out, I'm not saying, I don't know what the exact solution is, but I do know this. I know that the cash goes south. So it's got to all be laundered. It's going through our financial system. And I've covered stories where every major bank has been, hit with money laundering charges. They get a slap on the wrist. The people that charged them leave the Department of Justice and go to work under contracts, supposedly monitoring them. They all make money on it, and nothing changes, right? So that's the money laundering part. The other part, and I'll preface this by saying I grew up in Wisconsin around hunters. I am like a second. What I worry about with guns is that people know how to use them, right? That they use them properly, that they're not, idiots. Because I grew up around hunters, and that was the rule. There's certain things you learn about guns when you're growing up around that environment. So I'm not like anti-gun. Just obviously I'm anti-mass shooting and all the that's going on. But who has the solution? That's a conversation. What's the best solution? But 80% of the guns that are used by the cartels in Mexico come from the United States.
Yep.
Another big share come from Israel. Not that it's mostly U.S. guns, but we are not, and that all flows south. You could sell a gun down there. You take an AR-15, and it will sell for 5 times what you pay for it here. And you take a truckload of those down there, it's more profitable than drugs. Mm-hmm. And there's 500,000 guns that get into Mexico every year.
I mean, it's always follow the money, right? If I have no scruples,
that's what I did.
Yeah. If I have no scruples about me, and I'm looking at a truckload of guns, and I can make 5 times what I could in the United States, I'm going to go down to Mexico and sell it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the guns are getting in there somehow. And arguably you could cut all the guns off from the U.S., which I think just out of, I think that would be smart. But they would still find a way to get guns, right? That's what people would argue. And that may be true, but it's like, you can't really start fixing this problem until you take some steps, right? And maybe it leads you to a better place. You don't know till you try. You can speculate all you want. You got to try something different. So that's the way I look at it. Is we pay, and those are harder cases to make. Gun and money laundering cases are much harder than busting a load of pills at the border or a load of cocaine, which is replaceable. It's just, maybe that particular cartel, more likely the mules and the people that were in charge of that load, maybe they get whacked for it. There is a consequence, but it doesn't stop the drug trade, because there's always, you make more cocaine, you can, make more pills. You can make this stuff is not limited.
I mean, it's part of their budget, right? Like every single one of these cartel leaders knows that a percentage of their product is going to get stopped. They write that in, they account for that.
Exactly. They'll send 3 loads across. They'll buy off. And what I saw when I covered it in Juarez is they buy off inspectors at the bridge, right? And they honeypot, they trap them. A lot of them, they just draw them in. They'll send, one case, they will send a woman across the border to cozy up to a lonely, customs inspector and slowly draw them in, right? And once they let one load pass or they do one illegal thing, they're trapped, right?
Sure.
And so that's how they worked on our side. And then they would send 3 loads across in the trucks, figuring 1 will get busted and 2 will get through. I mean, you're right. And then the people involved with the load that got busted, their lives didn't end well usually, because, they don't want them to talk. So there's so many of these guys that were just low-level mules, U.S. citizens in some cases, or U.S. residents, and get drawn in a little extra money or whatever the heck they're thinking. And if it goes sideways, they end up in a bad place. Or the DEA recruits them as an informant, and they get sent back, and they end up, whacked with a finger.
Whacked anyway, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's and I saw it over and over again. And it's just and then I started looking at the drug war, and I said, what is the incentive to stop this? Everybody around it is making money. Clearly, the cartels are. And in terms of the government, all these agencies involved get bigger budgets if they get headlines showing how they're busting all these drugs, even though they know there's another load and another load right behind it. And they get more, guns and tanks and helicopters or whatever. So they don't really have an incentive to stop it. Besides they're, many of them are zealous about it and believe in it still. But a lot of these guys in the agencies I've talked to, have lost faith. Their morale sucks because they see the hypocrisy of it and how it's just, and you can't. In fact, one DEA guy was, supervised, ran a field office, said, and he was, very much into the drug war when he started. But he says, I've come to the conclusion we can't solve this with law enforcement alone. It just won't work. And so we need better thinking on this. We need new ideas. And you can't just whack a kingpin and think that's going to break up a cartel. It's similar to thinking like if the CEO of one of our large corporations was suddenly killed in a car crash, does the corporation go away?
Of course not.
No, there's some guy under him that wants that job all along and is just going to take it. The structure remains. You can't just kill people in the structure and think the structure is going to go away, especially when there's so much profit involved. And then a lot of these folks that get involved in the drug trade in Mexico, especially at the lower level, we used to refer to them as the crash test dummies because they are the ones that did the dying. They're usually street gangs. But their attitude is, they said, I'd rather have 5 years of a glorious life, knowing at the end of it they are going to be dead or in prison, than to live, 30 years of poverty, despair, and misery. I mean, that's how they, and these are younger kids, when their brains aren't
Sure.
fully developed. It tends to be 20 to early 30s, and they're they're the soldiers. The guys at the top making the money are pretty insulated from the ground wars until maybe we target them. But then what do we end up with? 3 different cartels because they fracture, or we get a new leader. The Jalisco cartel, we killed this leader back. It's still in fact, they are inking alliances with the Sinaloa cartel now up in Chihuahua, which brings us back to the 2 CIA agents that were killed there. So it's a quagmire, just like Iran, once we get into the middle of it down there in a shooting war. Not that we couldn't take over Mexico by, we've done that before and taken land from them, but there's going to be a price. This is guerrilla warfare down there at the highest level, and there's many, many competing factions, all very well armed, all with good intelligence. And if you go down there shooting up, like, what's the option there? Do we want to have a ground war in Mexico? What is that going to do to our economy, to the rest of the? It's crazy, and it's not. I don't see it as a path forward in a sane world. So, but we do have to address the problem, and that's where we need better thinking on it, better options, and try something new. Because this has been going on for 50 plus years, and we've got more drugs, cheaper drugs coming into the country than ever.
I would completely agree with this, and obviously as a libertarian, I have some strong thoughts and some questions about prohibition and forcing morality on people through government. That perhaps isn't working, and perhaps there is some free market solutions that we could attempt, at the very least attempt, because as you're pointing out, what we're doing now is not working. And if we're specifically funding, look, I hate a lot of government agencies, Bill. I really do. And I really dislike the IRS, and I really hate the DMV when I have to deal with them. But the CIA is an organization I really don't like. And if we're funding them, and actually we're coming up on a hard break, but I want to ask you some questions here about the CIA when we get back. But if we're funding them through the drug trades, then we need to put a stop to that. Now, Bill, I'm going to promote your website real quick, thegreatpretense.org. Chris, if you could bring that up real quick here, show the audience. I want everybody to go to this. We'll obviously be talking about this a whole lot more when we come back from the hard break.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier with Church and State, and I want to tell you about a great product, Liberty Cigars. I know for myself, there's nothing grander than sitting around a campfire, having a great theology discussion with a group of men while smoking a cigar. That's why I love Liberty Cigars. Every cigar has a story to tell. Not only are you going to be smoking the finest cigars on the market, but you're also going to get a history lesson with every single one of them. From George Washington to Thomas Jefferson, the heroes of the American Revolution, generals, presidents throughout history. I'm telling you, I absolutely love Liberty Cigars. I need you to go to libertycigars.com. Use that promo code Church and State. You'll get a discount, and you'll also be helping to support Church and State with everything that we do.
And we are back, and thank you for staying with us. You're over at churchandstate.media, and we're going to go right back to our guest. But real quick, let's cover one of our great affiliates. And since we're talking about the CIA, and obviously one of the things that I dislike about government is constant surveillance, well, let me talk about Ghost Phones, because I love this company. You also know I work for them, so I'm very open about that. But mark37.com, ladies and gentlemen, look, get a phone that doesn't spy on you. Get one that's operating under Graphene OS. That's the operating system there. It's private. It's secure. You look at your iPhone, you look at your Android, everything you're doing is being monitored, is being tracked. And literally, they're doing social engineering experiments on you to get you to operate or think in a specific manner. If you're done with that, go check out mark37.com. Most of these phones are cheaper than what you can get at your local AT&T or T-Mobile store. So go check them out, mark37.com. Use the coupon code Church and State. You're going to get a discount, and you'll help support us, and you'll get a great phone. All right. And one more time, hit the donate button for us as well. Once again, conversations like this, they matter. They really, really do. We need to break through the whole left-right paradigm. We're fighting the wrong people, ladies and gentlemen. Shows like this, where we're just covering the news, the hard-hitting topics, asking the questions that a lot of people don't want to touch. Please hit the donate button for us. All right, with that, let's go back to our guest. I'm having a great conversation. I hope the audience is as well. They're enjoying the show. But Bill, I wanted to ask you this, because a lot of people would say, the CIA, they don't operate in the United States. They're not allowed to operate in the United States by law. But one of the things I appreciate about your work is, yeah, they do. And you've proved it. If they're running drugs into the United States using cutouts, I get it, right? Mm-hmm. That's how they stay away. No, it wasn't us. Our hands are clean. Yeah, well, you hired this person. They are operating in the United States, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say that the line between the border and let's say in Mexico and the United States is more of a zone. When they were flying these black flying drugs into these black operations, they would land them at military bases, according to the pilots I talked to, right? And they had routes all across the United States where they'd fly the drugs, and guns back. So this was the Iran-Contra era, but my book takes it as, all these operations that I covered at Narco News, because I kept running across the CIA. It shows that this pattern has continued. That, one guy told me that if there's an operation that even works a little bit, the CIA will keep it. It's not, maybe it's inactive for a while until they need to deploy it, right? But they have these guys that they call up, and they're teams of black operators. They're black ops, and they do get funded by the money thrown off from their black operations. That's one way they do it, because they want, in many cases, in the past, they don't want Congress to know about it. They don't want the media to know about it. These are like deeply, classified operations that even the courts can't touch. There was the recent case of speaking of CIA operations in the United States, how do they explain the CIA guy, high-level CIA guy that was arrested by the FBI, and, they found like 300 gold bars at his house. Why was the gold there? And the latest on the case is they've invoked national security, and now most of that evidence will never come out. They haven't charged the guy with stealing gold because they can't, right? We'll see, because there's too much intertwined that would come out. So they're getting him on lying on his resume, basically. But there's no excuse for if we got gold bars sitting at some high-level CIA guy's house in the United States. It's hard to make an argument they don't have some nexus to operations in the United States.
I would completely agree. Yeah, I mean, that guy might have more gold than Fort Knox currently does. I don't know.
But that's still playing out, and we don't know if he, did it corruptly or it was part of some operation, and he was skimming or whatever. But there's a lot of gold. We recently decapitated Maduro with Venezuela. Venezuela has a lot of gold and oil, and Colombia has a lot of emeralds and gold too. And everyone's got their fingers in that, right? The cartels do, we do, the government's not. It should belong to the governments down there, but when, who owns the gold in Venezuela now? If we decapitated the president, which we say that regime is illegal or wasn't elected legally anyway, yet we're propping it up, and the opposition is being locked out, and all the gold and oil is disappearing because there's a lot of greedy people that want that gold and oil.
Bill, I'm so glad you brought up. I was actually going to transition to Venezuela. I wanted to take this conversation into honestly, the just recent past. We've been talking about the 80s and all that, but let's bring it into Venezuela here, because I loved this one. I hate being lied to personally. I mean, maybe that's just me. But we were told, this isn't an act of war, and I'm like, if Canada attacked the United States, just went in and kidnapped our president, I think we'd call that an act of war. I mean, that's where I'm at. But we were told, because once again, tying this all into your work here, we were told that Venezuela, we had to take them out because they were killing so many American citizens through the transportation of drugs into our country. And I'm over here like, it was about oil, like a little bit louder for the people in the back. It's about oil, like, come on now. This is ridiculous, but we have this perfect boogeyman that we dust off, and that boogeyman can look like any different thing. They roll it out all the time, keep the people in fear so that they can be controlled.
Yeah, I mean, in the early 2000s with the Iraq war and everything, it was terrorism, and we had the 9/11 attack as the rallying cry. That's since disappeared, so they need a new one, and it's now become narco terrorist, right? And they start declaring all these groups terrorists. Venezuela doesn't produce any drugs. They were a transshipment lane, and no doubt there were people on the take in Venezuela that for allowing it, just like the guy we pardoned in Honduras, letting drugs flow and getting paid off in exchange. I mean, that kind of corruption isn't left or right. It's just corruption, and it's everywhere, right? Especially when there's a lot of money to be made. And yeah, so there makes no sense what we did in Venezuela unless you look at it from a perspective of getting access and control of the oil, and then eventually getting U.S. corporations back into Venezuela to make a lot of money off that oil, which led in the first place to the Chavista revolution, because foreigners were from their perspective, robbing all of their natural resources and not giving them a fair return. So yeah, if we look at it from the perspective of capitalism, what would happen if somebody came in, took out our president, and decided that they're going to control all the levers to the capital markets and all the levers to even Main Street markets, right? And extract a pound of flesh from all those places and move it to whatever country they invaded from. That's the history of the world, isn't it?
Truly it is.
And so we just got to be honest about that. If we were really down there for democracy, the current regime would be gone. And they say it's a transition, it takes time. Well, the truth of the matter is they took out the head of the government, Maduro, but Venezuela was not like it wasn't a cult. I mean, there are political factions inside Venezuela to deal with, and once they removed Maduro, who was kind of mediating those factions, they all started taking care of their own. So we have a state security force in Venezuela that's as brutal as ever that we're helping to prop up. Through their, and he's not happy with the United States. He's not going to play ball with us, but he'll take our money, and they don't, they want to stay in power, so they're going to do what they need to continue oppressing people that threaten their power. And so there's a I guess mutual interest, but they don't like each other. So we aren't ever going to change the regime to be more democratic in Venezuela on the current glide path we're on. I don't think that was the intent. I think I think Trump said as much, that he'll make them another state, or essentially they're a protector. They're like a protectorate, like Guam or whatever, right?
Yep.
So without any Congress involved, just unilaterally, and then we've been extracting the oil, and I think we're just squeezing that country, making it worse and harder for them to keep some kind of violent upheaval from happening. And when that happens, when we light that tinderbox, it spreads. What do? Do we just let it, let it happen? Or do we have to commit U.S. troops again? All these things have a consequence if they're not thought through. And just, stealing someone's oil, you can expect that's going to create some blowback. And that's been the history of the CIA. They get their marching orders from whatever, the National Security Council, the White House, they carry it out, and then the blowback comes. And the blowback is often worse than whatever the mission accomplished. That's just been the history of it. Vietnam, it was heroin flooding the streets here. Because we were working with groups in the Vietnam era.
Plus we had the government pushing LSD, amongst the hippies. So I mean, they've been at this for a long time.
Afghanistan again, the opium trade. And there's a nexus to almost every war where there's drugs. Because it's just a cash cow, and there's people are people. If they see a chance to make a lot of money, they're gonna, and with little risk, even if it's immoral or people in many cases die, they can rationalize that. Well, they're gonna die anyway. This is just I'm just taking mine, etc. But it just perpetuates the corruption of it. So I don't know how you solve that, but I think. I agree with your analysis. The CIA is they usually aren't working in the interests of the American people so much as the interests of a powerful elite that can capitalize on whatever resource they're targeting. The oil companies are doing fine right now. Energy stocks are higher than ever.
Yeah, and in typical fashion, these bureaucrats, they don't care, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in political power, right? They can wait them out. Even if we got somebody like if you want to consider the spectrums, right? We had Ron Paul, which would have been, in my opinion, a phenomenal president. And then you had Bernie Sanders, and a lot of people that had supported Ron Paul went over and started supporting Bernie Sanders because they were viewed as outsiders. But even if we got somebody like that, either one of these two people into the executive office, the bureaucrats would just wait them out. And they'd still be doing all of their things, and they'd hide all of their operations from the president. And they'd keep doing their things. We'd keep sticking our noses in other countries' affairs, creating havoc, creating wars. Bill, I'm a Marine veteran, and I'm glad that I served. But I tell my two boys all the time, you will not join the military. I'm not going to have my boys die in some banker's war. That's my perspective now. That's sadly enough, that's where I am at.
Well, I got kids too, and frankly, I feel the same way. I don't think they, who wants to be the last person to die for a cause that is done, that never existed. It was all manufactured. So, but at the same time, we have real threats. That's why it's hard to navigate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't made up threats. These, there's a lot of violence in the world, and a lot of people that want to take your things. It's not just us. We have our own, but we kind of, threw our weight around in ways. I think just like, especially recently, where we aren't measured. We don't really have a strategy. We just kind of think might makes right, and that's going to solve it. And it doesn't. It never has. It just creates more blowback because you can't, you can even have kill thousands of people. Every one of their relatives is going to have a vengeance against you, right? You're just creating more enemies. And, eventually you got to think of another way of doing it. And so I that's my thought, but you're absolutely right about the way the CIA is used. It's a sword, and it's in many ways following orders, if you will. But the CIA in its history, it's was started by elites, and it was always meant to defend the interest of the elites. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. You have absolutely nailed it right there. It is the elites, and that's why I said we've got our eye on the wrong enemy, the common people, the masses. Right? We're looking through, honestly, it's staged. And we really need to focus on these elites that do not have the interest of Americans, really just of humanity whatsoever. Bill, we've reached the end of the show. I feel like I could keep talking to you for a lot longer, but we only have about 45 minutes.
So can I say one thing? Just
please do. Yeah.
A measure of hope. I think it's my perspective. It's the systems we've created that allow this corruption to fester. So we got to fix the system, but it's also a human problem, and people got to have some values. And if their value is just do whatever it is to make myself comfortable and rich, and or richer, and I'm in a bubble where there's no consequence for me doing that, which we've created, in this country now, are we surprised with what we got, right? I mean, integrity goes a long way, and I don't think we're ruled by people with integrity anymore. I mean, in fact, the fact that we're even ruled is the word I hate. We're supposed to be governed, and it's supposed to be a democracy, and the power is supposed to come from the people up, not from the leaders down. And the script's been switched. There's too much money in politics. That's part of it, as we know. But yeah, it's just a revolving door in government. They go in and they do what they're told, hoping to come out, make money in the private sector, get hired by one of these big companies. How can they have an interest other than serving the interests of the people that are going to give them the paycheck?
And the cycle just keeps continuing. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I echo what you said. If we're a constitutional republic, a very, very small, limited government, and the power was supposed to be based off the people. We should go back to that. My gosh, will we be better off as a country? I'm going to bring up your website one more time because I want everybody to go here. thegreatpretense.org. Chris has brought it up for us. You can see the latest book, The Great Pretense. That's what the website is named after. But your website has all your books, numerous interviews that you've done. Tell us a little bit more and why the audience should go here.
Well, the book is basically, it's a bit of a memoir because I'm talking about how I covered the drug war and how I ran across the CIA. And it's all documented. There's pages of documentation. You can go check out. Everything I say is I'm not just winging it. I talked to, over the course of years, this was reported out, dozens and dozens of people, public records that were leaked to me, et cetera. And it kind of traces in over the years how the CIA is involved with the drug war, which I call the war for drugs, because everyone is fighting to get the drugs, making money off the drugs, but the drugs aren't really stopping, right? And so, it traces that history, and also talks about, really, it's kind of a manual how to find and decipher and cover black covert operations, how they work, how I found the trail and what I did to ferret all this out. So it's instructional that way. If you're curious about how black operations work, it's instructional about the hidden history of the drug war, and it also hopefully is a good read because there's a lot happening in every chapter about the dirty tricks and the fallout, the blowback is what I call it, from this drug war.
Well,
it's not really serving our interests anymore. Maybe it's put to us that way, but at the end of the day, it's really not helping the guy in the street at all.
Sure. And we should be doing something about that. And part of that is getting this information out there. I can't wait to read this book. It's definitely right up my alley. So I'm going to encourage the audience once again to go to thegreatpretense.org, order the book. And Bill, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We'll have to have you back probably after I read the book. We'll get you back on. But I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If you hold on one more minute post-production to say our goodbyes, I'd appreciate it. But again, thank you for joining us on Church and State.
Yeah, it was good talking to you, Caleb.
Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Exposing the truth here, which is really one of the motives that I have for doing the show on a daily basis, is exposing what's going on, revealing the truth. And this book is one of those things. It should be on every bookshelf in America. Please order it, thegreatpretense.org. Church and State is brought to you in part by Colonial Life Spokane Independent Agents, Finders Insurance, and Mark37.com. I'm Caleb Collier. I was born for a storm.
Welcome to the fire.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier with Church and State. I'm here to tell you about Hunter's Blend Coffee. I got to tell you, I absolutely love this stuff. I'm all about the dark roast. Hunter's Blend Coffee, black powder. Doesn't that just sound like deliciousness, and rebellion. I got to tell you, in America, we don't drink tea. No, we drink coffee. It's the food of the gods, and I endorse and support Hunter's Blend coffee. Got to tell you. Tastes like freedom. So I need you to go over to churchandstate.media, scroll to Hunter's Blend Coffee, and use the promo code Church and State to help support us. And when you go to huntersblendcoffee.com, not only will you be getting a great cup of coffee, but you also, if you use the promo code Church and State, be supporting Church and State and our dogged pursuit of truth. Hey, this is Caleb Collier with Church and State, and I want to tell you about Patriot Pouch. Look, if you're one of these individuals that's interested in nicotine and potentially the health benefits from it, but you're concerned about some of the side effects, Patriot Pouch might be your answer. This is a company that uses nixidine instead of nicotine. It hits the same nicotine receptors in your brain, but without those side effects like elevated heart rate or elevated blood pressure. So if you want the health benefits of nicotine without nicotine, Patriot Pouch may be the company for you. I need you to go to patriotpouchusa.com. Use the promo code Church and State. You'll get a great nicotine replacement, and you'll be helping to support Church and State and everything that we do here. And remember, when you go to patriotpouchusa.com, not only are you supporting a Christian patriot business owner, but you're helping to support Church and State. Hey, this is Caleb Collier with Church and State, and I want to tell you about methylene blue. For a long time now, you've seen the Maha people using methylene blue. I thought I'd give it a try. You know what? It helped me considerably, not only with mental clarity, but also with insomnia. Now, you got to be careful with methylene blue because the market is filled with counterfeit products. But Best 365 Labs is the greatest methylene blue on the market. Telling you, take this stuff, enjoy the benefits, and it'll also have a little bit of fun when going to the bathroom. I need you to go to best365labs.com and use that promo code Church and State. You're going to get a discount. You'll also be helping to support Church and State and our pursuit of truth.